If you've ever Googled what to eat for SIBO, you've landed on one of those scary lists of foods that you can't have. You know, the ones where everything fun to eat is gone and what's left looks like a sad hospital tray. This episode is for anyone who's stuck on chicken, rice, and fear. And if you're chuckling to yourself a little bit right now because that's literally what's in your fridge, the chicken and rice part, I've been there. I've also worked with so many people who show up eating like that, not because they love plain, boring food, but because they're afraid of what will happen if they add anything back in. And I get it. When your gut feels unpredictable, you start to shrink your diet down to that safe zone. And while that might calm symptoms for a little while, it's not a long-term solution. In fact, if you stay there too long, it can actually slow down your healing and make you more sensitive. So, today we're going to talk about the problem with most SIBO diets, what to eat instead, and how to put it all into a bigger picture so that you can actually move forward in a lasting way, not just keep going in circles. Let's start by talking about the problem with most SIBO diets. So, let's start with the obvious. Restrictive SIBO diets, they do have a role, and I'm not here to villainize them completely. In fact, I have my own version available for download on my website. We'll also link to it in the show notes. So, in the short term, SIBO diets can make life a lot more comfortable. They can feel like a godsend because if you're bloated after every bite or dealing with miserable gas and pain, pulling out certain fermentable carbs brings relief pretty quickly. So, we do use them in our practice, and they do really help when you're in crisis mode. Low FODMAP, SIBO specific, biphasic diets, those are a few of the examples. There are a bunch of different versions out there of SIBO diets. They all work in a similar way. They reduce the foods your overgrown bacteria love to feed on, so you get fewer symptoms. You eat less of the food that ferments in your small intestine when there's bacteria in your small intestine. The bacteria throw a little tantrum because you took away their buffet and you feel relief. And that's the good news. But here's the part no one tells you about when you're downloading those foods to avoid PDFs from Google. These diets are not a full treatment plan. They don't heal the gut lining. They don't fix the motility issues that allowed SIBO to set up camp in the first place. And they definitely don't help you rebuild a strong, diverse microbiome for the long haul. They're like pressing the mute button on a fire alarm. You stop hearing the noise, but you haven't actually put out the fire. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I had a client who came to me eating the same three meals every day: chicken and zucchini, or chicken and carrots, or chicken with green beans, basically. Breakfast was just eggs. She'd been doing this for almost a year because it kept the bloating away. But she was exhausted, anxious about eating anywhere other than home, and starting to react to foods that she used to tolerate. And that's what happens when you over restrict for too long. Your gut microbiome starts to lose diversity, which means it gets more fragile instead of stronger. And it's not just the microbiome that suffers. When you're on these diets long term, nutrient deficiencies can creep in simply because entire food groups are off the table. I often see low magnesium from cutting high fiber foods and low iron from lack of variety in the diet. Both of these slow gut repair. Magnesium supports motility and digestion, while iron delivers oxygen to the gut lining and keeps inflammation in check. So, without enough of the right nutrients, healing drags and symptoms tend to linger. Another thing that surprises a lot of people: when you cut out most fermentable carbs for too long, your gut motility can actually slow down. Those fibers you've eliminated aren't just food for bacteria, they're also part of what keeps the digestive conveyor belt moving. And slower motility, that's basically an open invitation for SIBO to come right back. So the very thing you're doing to keep symptoms away can set you up for a relapse. It's a little like thinking you're protecting your house by locking every single door and window, but then you also lock yourself inside without food or water. You've kept the threat out, but you've also created a whole new problem for yourself. And I've been on both sides of this as a clinician helping patients and as someone who's dealt with my own gut issues. I get in the mindset of if I just stay on my safe list, I won't have to deal with a flare. But what actually happens is you end up stuck in this tiny, repetitive food loop, still not feeling great and wondering why it's not working anymore. Another thing I see often, and I'm saying this with the most compassion, is that restriction can start to feel like control. When your gut feels unpredictable, controlling your food list is something tangible that you can do. And when you feel physically awful, having any sense of control feels good in the moment. But it's a false sense of security because over time, the control starts controlling you, and you end up afraid of perfectly normal, healthy foods. I've had people cry in my office because they ate half a sweet potato and spent the rest of the day convinced they'd ruined everything and they were back to square one. Not because the food was bad, but because they'd been living in this restricted space for so long that any deviation felt dangerous. And that's the emotional cost of over restriction. And it's just as real as the physical cost. So, yes, SIBO diets can be helpful for a phase. They can give you breathing room while you work on the root cause, but they are not a maintenance plan. They are not meant to be your forever way of eating. And if you only ever use that one tool, you're going to stay stuck in restriction mode instead of moving toward real healing. So, next, we're going to talk about what to eat instead, how to actually transition out of this restricted place without sending your symptoms through the roof, because that's the part most people skip. And it's exactly why they keep ending up back at square one. So now let's actually answer the question, what should you eat for SIBO? If overly restrictive SIBO diets aren't meant to be forever, the big question is, what do you eat instead? And maybe even more importantly, how do you make that transition without ending up doubled over in pain or running to the bathroom every 5 minutes? The short answer is the goal is to start feeding your body and your microbiome again in a way that supports healing, keeps motility moving, and doesn't send you straight into a flare. And that means thinking about a few key areas: blood sugar balance, microbiome health, fiber reintroduction, and digestive support. Number one is balancing meals for blood sugar and motility. This is where a lot of SIBO diets miss the mark. People get so focused on avoiding FODMAPs that they end up eating mostly protein and fat. Now, don't get me wrong, protein and fat are important, but if you're only eating chicken, eggs, cheese, and olive oil, your blood sugar is probably on a roller coaster. You're low in energy, and your motility isn't getting the support it needs. Balanced meals help keep energy stable, reduce stress on your nervous system, and encourage your digestive tract to keep moving. That means making sure you've got protein for repair and satiety, healthy fats for nutrient absorption, carbohydrates, yep, carbohydrates for energy and motility support, and non-starchy vegetables for fiber and nutrients. One of my clients, she was leery when I suggested adding a small portion of quinoa to her lunch because she had been avoiding grains for months. But within a week, her afternoon energy crashes were gone, and she noticed her bowel movements were more regular. They weren't perfect yet, but they were better. And that was just from making that one change of adding a small portion of high fiber carbs to her lunch. So that's the power of giving your body the fuel it actually needs to function. The second thing is don't cut all FODMAPs. Reintroduce what you can gradually. The thing is, with FODMAPs, they're not bad foods. In fact, they're really good foods. But they're fermentable carbs that bacteria feed on. And if you have SIBO, certain ones can cause symptoms right now. But in a healthy gut, they actually feed the good bacteria for the long term. In the last episode, I talked about why the traditional eliminate then reintroduce approach often fails, because if you haven't fixed the underlying issues, you'll just react to everything you add back. And that's still true here. The difference is once you've started addressing the root causes like motility, gut lining repair, and microbiome balance, it's important to start bringing some of these foods back in a slow, strategic way. That might mean you still can't do garlic or onions right now, but you might tolerate small amounts of applesauce or lentils. The goal isn't to get back to eating everything overnight, it's to expand your safe foods little by little in the context of an actual healing plan, so you're not stuck with the same five foods forever. The third thing is focus on feeding the gut microbiome the right way. This is the part that gets missed the most often. Restrictive SIBO diets can starve the bad bacteria, yes, but they also starve the good bacteria. And without a healthy microbiome, you're way more likely to relapse. Feeding the gut microbiome doesn't mean throwing a ton of raw broccoli and beans on your plate tomorrow. It's about finding gentle, well tolerated prebiotic fibers and gradually building your way up. For example, I might have a client start with something like kiwi or cooked carrots, foods that have some fermentable fiber but are generally well tolerated. Once they've handled those well, we might add a tablespoon of overnight oats or a sprinkle of ground flaxseed. Over time, we work toward more variety because diversity in your diet leads to diversity in your microbiome. And diversity in your microbiome's version of an insurance policy. And diversity is your microbiome's version of an insurance policy. It makes it more resilient to stress, illness, and even the occasional junk food binge. And the fourth thing is add fiber back slowly to avoid a relapse. This one is huge. If you jump from 10 grams of fiber a day to 30 grams overnight, your gut is going to notice and not in a good way. The sudden change can leave you bloated, gassy, and uncomfortable because your gut bacteria just went from famine to feast. It's like throwing an impromptu party. Everyone shows up, but you weren't prepared for that many people, so you end up with complete chaos. Adding fiber slowly means starting with small, consistent amounts and increasing every few days or weeks depending on tolerance. That might mean going from half a kiwi to a whole kiwi or from 1 tablespoon of oats to two. It sounds slow, and it is, but slow is what keeps you moving forward instead of backsliding into another SIBO flare. One patient of mine was so eager to fix her microbiome after SIBO treatment that she went all in. Huge salads twice a day, and she was up to about 35 grams of fiber. Within a week, her gas was back with a vengeance, and she was convinced her SIBO had returned. But the thing was, it was not a SIBO relapse. It was simply too much fiber too fast for a microbiome that had been depleted after months of treatment. And I actually see this a lot when people try to add fiber too fast because the symptoms feel the same. They think the SIBO's relapsed, and that's not necessarily the case. So, this is just such an important point that after long or repeated SIBO treatment. Let me repeat this because I do see this so much. After long and repeated SIBO treatment, people mistake fiber or FODMAP intolerance as proof that the overgrowth is still active, when in reality, it's often a sign that the gut bacteria is depleted and needs to be rebuilt slowly, not blasted again with more antibiotics or antimicrobials. The worst thing you can do in that stage is to keep killing bacteria that are already gone. And that's why SIBO experts like Alyssa Becker, practitioners like myself who work with SIBO all the time, don't do more than 2 rounds of antimicrobials without retesting. Because if the SIBO is gone, the real work at that point is rebuilding tolerance and diversity so your gut can handle more, not less. Sometimes the fastest way forward is really the slowest. And the next thing is use meals to support digestion because how you eat is just as important as what you eat. If you inhale your food in 3 bites while checking your email, you're not giving your digestive system the best shot at success. So, here are a few simple things that make a big difference. Number one is meal spacing. Give your migrating motor complex time to work between meals. About 3 to 4 hours between meals and snacks is ideal for most people. Also, chewing thoroughly. This isn't glamorous, but digestion starts in the mouth. Chewing well signals your digestive enzymes to get moving and be released and start working. And then also digestive support. And this might mean bitters before meals, digestive enzymes, or even just a little extra bile support if you have had your gallbladder removed. The key is to use these strategically while you're healing and until your system is more resilient, not necessarily forever. And if you need help putting the diet recommendations together, that's exactly what my 7-day SIBO diet meal plan is designed for. It's not just a list of safe foods, it's a full week of balanced, gut-friendly meals and built-in variety so you can start expanding your diet with confidence. So you can grab that through the link in the show notes. So now let's bring it all together. Transitioning out of restriction isn't about going from safe list to eat whatever you want in one leap. It's about moving step by step toward a diet that feeds you and your microbiome, supports digestion, and keeps motility humming along. The best part is when you do it right, you're not just avoiding symptoms, you're building a gut that can handle more so you can get back to living your life without your food list running the show. And this is why food is only one piece of the puzzle. What you eat matters, but without supporting motility, gut lining, and nervous system health, even the best diets won't hold. The thing with SIBO is killing the overgrowth is not the finish line. It's more like mowing your lawn without fixing the broken sprinkler system underneath. Sure, it'll look better for a minute, but the weeds are already planning their return. Sit with this for a second. What if I told you that SIBO is a symptom, not a final diagnosis? Now, I know that's not technically true from a medical coding standpoint. SIBO does have its own insurance code now, and it's officially recognized as a diagnosis. But in practice, it's almost always the result of something else going on in your gut or in your body. Something allowed that overgrowth to happen. And if you don't address that something, you've just pressed pause, not stop. This is why so many people relapse. They think, okay, I did my 2 months of antimicrobials, I feel better, I'm good. And then 3 months later, the symptoms are back, sometimes worse than before. If you want lasting results, you have to keep going after treatment, not in the sense of more killing, but in the sense of building your gut back up so it's resilient. And that means working on a few big areas that tend to get overlooked. So let's talk about those areas in a little bit more detail. Let's talk about motility. And this is your digestive cleaning crew. If you've been following me for a while, you've heard me talk about the MMC, the migrating motor complex. It's your gut's built-in cleaning wave that sweeps leftover food and bacteria down the line between meals. When it's not working well, it's like a restaurant that skips the nightly cleanup. You walk in the next morning to find yesterday's dishes still in the sink, the mess sitting there, and it's only a matter of time before unwanted critters start showing up and multiplying. Supporting motility can involve a few different strategies, and here's where I want to clear up a big misconception. Motility is not just about bowel movements. When I say the word motility, 100% of people think I mean going to the bathroom, having a bowel movement. I'm talking about upper GI motility, the movement that happens in your stomach and small intestine between meals. That's the migrating motor complex or the MMC. And so many things about it are completely different from the lower GI motility, which is the movement of the colon, which is what people think of when they think of motility agents. They're thinking of laxatives. So for some people, supporting upper GI motility might include natural or prescription motility agents, things like ginger, certain herbal blends like iberogast or prokinetic medications from your doctor. Those might be things like Motegrity, low dose erythromycin, things like that. But just as important is your nervous system. When you're stuck in fight or flight mode, digestion is not your body's priority and your MMC slows down. I've seen patients make bigger motility gains from stress regulation than from anything in a capsule. And that might be vagus nerve exercises, daily walks, or simple breathing techniques that help shift the body out of fight or flight mode. Another piece of the puzzle is meal spacing, giving your gut a few hours between meals so the MMC can do its job because it only moves in a fasting state. So think of motility support as half physical, half nervous system. Both have to be in play. The second thing is calming inflammation and repairing the gut lining. If SIBO's been hanging around for a while, your gut lining has taken some hits. Chronic bacterial overgrowth irritates and inflames the intestinal lining, making it more permeable. That's what they mean when they say leaky gut, and more reactive to foods. And that's why people often still feel sensitive to certain foods even after the SIBO is gone. Repairing the gut lining is a bit like fixing a damaged fence. Until it's mended, anything can wander in and cause trouble. So the good news is, though, your body wants to heal, it just needs some of the right building blocks. The most important part, by and large, is getting rid of the overgrowth because that's what's causing the inflammation. And then if you want to take it a bit further, there are some other things that provide building blocks that make it easier and faster for your gut lining to heal more completely. Those might be amino acids. That's why you hear so much about L-glutamine to fuel intestinal cells. Soothing herbs like slippery elm, marshmallow root, those help to calm irritation and stimulate a healthy, robust mucus layer. And anti-inflammatory support, maybe things like curcumin, omega-3s, or polyphenol-rich foods. And let's not forget the role of food here. Cooked vegetables instead of raw when your sensitivity is high and your gut lining is inflamed. Those gentle fibers are much better tolerated. And anti-inflammatory foods like berries or leafy greens, even if they're blended into a smoothie so the fiber's not as irritating, or extra virgin olive oil or fish oils. These foods can be very therapeutic. So the goal is to reduce the alarm bells in the gut so it can go back to its normal, calm, absorb and digest mode. And then the third thing is bile and enzyme support. When SIBO is active, the inflammation from the SIBO doesn't just irritate the gut lining, it can also affect how well your pancreas and gallbladder function. Inflammation can actually slow bile release from the gallbladder and reduce digestive enzyme production from the pancreas. We see it all the time in stool testing, which means you're not breaking down fats well, and you're also not breaking down proteins or carbohydrates efficiently. Undigested food, therefore, hangs around and feeds bacteria more, and that creates a vicious cycle that makes SIBO even harder to resolve. As a side note, this is also part of why we often see SIBO develop after gallbladder removal, because without steady bile flow, it's easier for bacteria to overgrow in the small intestine because food remains undigested, and then also because an unconcentrated bile-rich environment can feed especially certain types of SIBO. So supporting bile flow and digestive enzymes during the healing process can help to break that cycle. This kind of support acts as a bridge, helping you absorb more nutrients and sending less undigested food down to feed the bacteria. As treatment progresses and inflammation calms down, your pancreas and gallbladder can start functioning more normally again, but that recovery isn't always immediate. For some people, it takes time, and continued support is helpful during that transition. This might look like incorporating bile-friendly foods, meaning foods that help stimulate or support healthy bile flow. That would be things like beets, arugula, artichokes. You can also use digestive bitters before meals or take targeted digestive enzyme blends temporarily. By targeted, I just mean a supplement chosen to match your needs, something that includes the right balance of enzymes to break down proteins, fat, and carbs, and in some cases, extra support like ox bile or betaine HCl if fat digestion is an issue or if low stomach acid is part of the picture. And now let's talk about nervous system regulation. I know I touched on this in the motility section, but it deserves its own section. The gut-brain connection is not just a trendy term. It's literally how your digestive system is wired. If your brain thinks you're in danger, digestion gets shut down. For some people, their SIBO started after a stressful life event, like a move, a job change, an illness, or even a long period of being overworked. Your body adapted to survival mode and digestion became secondary as a default. Nervous system work can look different for everyone. For some, it's a structured stress management practice like meditation, yoga, or therapy. And for others, it's building in simple joy and rest, more time outdoors, laughter, hobbies, and connection. One of my clients started doing 5 minutes of deep breathing before meals, and within 2 weeks, she was having more regular bowel movements without changing a single thing in her diet. So that's the power of getting your body to feel safe enough to digest and move. So, why does all this stuff matter when we're talking about the SIBO diet? If you only kill the overgrowth, but you ignore motility, or if you only starve the bacteria, but you ignore motility, gut lining repair, digestive secretions, and nervous system balance, you actually haven't fixed the conditions that allowed SIBO to take hold. And that's why I say SIBO is a symptom, not a diagnosis. The diagnosis is whatever created the environment for that overgrowth in the first place. Think of it like if your house floods, you don't just pump the water out and call it a day. You figure out where the leak came from, fix that, or you'll just keep mopping water up over and over again. So let's bring this all together. When you look at the bigger healing picture, SIBO recovery isn't about more and more rounds of antimicrobials. It's about shifting from removing the problem to building the foundation. That foundation is what keeps SIBO from coming back and, even more importantly, helps you eat with more freedom and less fear. So as you move forward, think beyond the killing phase. Make sure you're also working on supporting motility so food and bacteria keep moving through the small intestine, repairing your gut lining and calming inflammation, strengthening digestion so you're breaking down and absorbing nutrients fully, and regulating your nervous system so your body feels safe enough to digest. When those pieces come together, you're not just SIBO free, you're building a gut that's resilient, diverse, and able to handle life's curveballs. And that's the real goal. If you're tired of being stuck in restriction mode and you're ready for a real plan that helps you start healing before the next flare hits, I'd love for you to join me for my free masterclass on September 4th. In this class, we're going to dig into what's really keeping your gut inflamed and reactive and exactly what to focus on now so that you're not still stuck by Thanksgiving. You'll walk away knowing the steps that actually move the needle beyond just another round of food lists or killing plans, so you can start to feel better and eat with more freedom. You can sign up through the link in the show notes, and I would love to see you there.